I'm a little bit of a crazy bastard when it comes to pain. The fiercely competitive person will always beat the more talented one. As a coach, I can never tell you to do something, but I can ask you the right question. That for me is the proof of what good culture can look like. Everyone that used to play me through my early 20s would have said that I was a bit of a prick. How would I describe myself? A tenacious, no-holds-bar competitor that did set me apart from the chasing pack. You don't want to fail, but you learn how to cope with it. Failure is okay. Failure is okay. Failure is okay, because then you're actually getting growing. I didn't want to not put on the black shirt. In my career, I played 320 internationals. Not one of them would I have been at 100%. Not a single game.
My name is Kyla Colbin. You're listening to my interview with Shea McAleese, and this is the Hunger and Heart Podcast. Enjoy the show. Hello, my name is Kyla Colbin, and welcome to episode 9 of Hunger and Heart, a podcast on the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. First up, I just want to say thank you. Since we launched the podcast last month, we have had thousands of listeners from 34 countries tune in. I am completely blown away. Thank you so much. If you are enjoying the pod, please, the biggest thing you can do, like it, share it, follow it, review it, all of those things that make the algorithm happy. You have the power for where we're able to take this from here, and I am so pumped to go on this ride together. All right, let's get into today's episode. My guest today is Shea McAleese. Shea is a 4-time Olympic hockey player. He's won silver and bronze medals at the Commonwealth Games. He is the 3rd most capped player in New Zealand history. He retired from playing after the Tokyo Olympics and is now coaching and growing his business. In this conversation, we talk about the definition of good culture, what it looks like to put everything on the line for your team, and how to train for pressure. So here you are, my conversation with Shea McAleese. What's your experience with this kind of intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion?
To be fair, they both run in parallel. I think if you, it does take a little bit of time to understand both as well. So like when I was younger, I was probably more in the space of fiercely competitive without the compassion that ran alongside it. And I think you probably don't understand both at the same time. I think it's a learned skill. Everyone said that I would have been compassionate off the ground, but as soon as I walked over the white line, I would have been, just fiercely competitive. And I think you need elements of that, right? But obviously I don't think I learned to be able to do both until a little bit later in life, I reckon. Everyone that used to play me probably through my early 20s would have said that I was a bit of a prick. But that's the kind of fiercely competitive nature that came out of me. And I also really enjoyed that because it also meant that I was really driven to succeed in my sport. But then, probably wasn't until the old man sat me down and said, "Yeah, you can be fiercely competitive, but you've also got to be very humble. And I want you to be able to look your opponent in the eye after the game and still be able to shake their hand because you've showed that compassion, whether you win or lose, because you would want the same thing. You never like the guy that wins in the opposition and then sort of rubs it in. So it was definitely a good sort of little turning point for me in my sporting career, and something that I've kind of tried to pride myself on through probably mid-20s all the way through to the end of my career when I was 37. So it definitely is a learned skill. I think you're not always going to nail it either in every single game. I think you've got those little pillars or pie in the sky attributes that you kind of always want to achieve. But it's also nothing wrong with not always getting there, right? Like you can't have them. I'm going to be fiercely competitive in this game and super compassionate. And obviously that's what we're striving to be. But if you don't reach it, it's also okay because then you can then reset and then re-go for the next one.
Amazing. I have a whole bunch of questions about this. Okay, so my first question is, what I'm hearing you say is, did you carry, I'm hearing you say something and I want to check if I've understood it correctly. I'm hearing you say that you carried an idea that being competitive on field meant that you also had to be kind of emotionally aggressive off field. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. So like it is in a way definitely like you want to I think to be a high performance athlete or an athlete that's really driven, you want to be fiercely competitive, right? Like it's the thing that will put you ahead of the rest. You know, there's everyone says that old saying of the fiercely competitive person will always beat the more talented one because they're the ones that will be driven to do all the stuff behind closed doors, which you don't always see. But then obviously fiercely compassionate is I always strove to be a really good person because I came from probably humble backgrounds as well, and to get to the level I needed to in my sport, I needed the support of a massive whānau, a massive community that would get in behind, and if they didn't like who I was, they wouldn't support me, right? So you know, when I went knocking on the door, even asking for food packages or $50 here and there to help me get on a tour, then they're more likely to support you if you're a good bugger. And I think that's the Kiwi way. So that we definitely have that kind of like tall poppy syndrome in New Zealand, where if you're not humble and not compassionate in and around your sport, they're probably going to eat you up and spit you out. So that's kind of the way I definitely tried to mold myself. But I had really good role models as well to look towards.
I have a bunch more. So first of all, my stepson, my middle stepson, he just went door knocking. He's competing in Wakaama right now in traditional
Oh,
Maori
nice.
rowing, and he just had to
Yeah,
go door knocking to fundraise to go to secondary school's national championships.
yeah,
And that activity was such a powerful learning experience for him in terms of, he had to practice what he was going to say. He had to accept rejection. He had to be prepared for all sorts of different responses. And he got way beyond the money that he raised. He got so much value from doing that. So just
yeah,
that door
yeah.
knocking thing, I love it. I'm curious about, you said early on that your dad sat you down and said you need to be a good bugger when you win. You don't want the other, you wouldn't like it when the other person's like that. What would you? So two combined questions on this. My first question is, how old were you when you had that conversation? And my second question is, if I were to ask your dad, would he say that that was the first time you'd had that conversation?
Yeah, definitely not. Like, I would say that Dad would have had that conversation with me yearly, probably from the point that I was sort of 13, and then it sort of probably hit home when I was around 23. So I would say over a 10-year cycle for it really to embed itself. I was, how would I describe myself? A tenacious, no holds bar competitor. And yeah, don't get me wrong. Like at times it wasn't great, but I think for most of it, it was actually really good because it did set me apart from probably the chasing pack. You know, I was always super competitive, but probably what I didn't realize is when you cross the line on the ground, and that could be in physical nature or in you know, verbal or giving people in the opposition a bit of stick. And that's kind of you know, no, I'm not super proud of it, but the mind games you would play. But I also didn't know any better, right? Like sport back in the day was quite like that. You know, sport nowadays is way less inclined to be verbal stoush or getting into a bit of niggle and stuff with your opponents because obviously everything's on social media with phones and TV and sports is just more prevalent in the viewership's eyes now. So it's definitely changed a lot. But even when I was in my early 20s, we're talking 18, 19 years ago, it wasn't around then. So actually having Dad consistently sit me down and talk me through that stuff was really good because it's not a conversation you can have once. It's a conversation that you probably need to have multiple times. And as I always said, like it's a learning capacity, right? So we've got to learn and grow in those environments as well. And I was learning every time my dad was talking to me, and then you know he would kind of follow me a little bit up and down the sideline and go, you know, I'm listening to you here and sort of catch you out on this one and go, oh, what did you think around when you said this one, when you got into a bit of niggle here, what did you think? How could you have done this? How could you have done this differently? And so that was all really good stuff that I was able to lean on, learn on, and grow. And then yeah, and I think if you were to ask some like international competitors that I played against through the later part of my career in my 20s and early 30s and stuff, they would say I was a fierce competitor, but also one that they'd really enjoy having a beer with us after the game. So that's probably the biggest thing I'd kind of drive home on, is that you're never going to be perfect. It's a learning environment, but you need good people around you to support you on what learning looks like and what good looks like. Because otherwise you might not know. And then also seek different supporters and different role models as well. Because like you might there were times where Dad sat me down and I didn't want to have a bar of it because he's my dad. But then like he would have a chat to the coach and then say, hey, I think this is a good time for you to do this. So always having more than one people in your corner to be able to do that, and people that are going to be honest with you, is also really important.
So you mentioned that you had to hear this over and over. Sometimes you had to hear it from different people. You said your dad probably started talking about this when you were 13, and maybe when you were 23, it kind of finally sunk in. Is there anything? I'm going to ask a question. It might be ridiculous. It might seem ridiculous to you. So, feel free to just
Just
say that
listen.
doesn't make any sense to me. But when you first said, my dad said this to me, and then I realized it sounded to me like I finally got it. Like there was a moment where you kind of heard what he was saying, that he'd been laying the ground for 10 years with this
Yeah.
message. And there was a moment when it kind of sunk in. Is there anything that you can think of in particular about that moment that was like, oh, this was, this happened in the game, or this is what I said to the player, or this is what I got in trouble for, or this is,
Yeah.
what was it that let you finally hear it?
Yeah, to be fair, it wasn't specifically in the match. It's exactly when the whistle blew afterwards, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just a real different rapport that I had with the opposing player. Like, it's why I really enjoy watching rugby and rugby league, because obviously it's a real physical natured sport, right? And then at the end of the game, regardless of what's happened, there might have been a bit of niggle or whatever. They still then shake hands and have a cuddle, and then they all hanging around on the ground and chatting about the game. And one team's just lost. That was probably the biggest part, is that when I went up to the opposition and shook their hand, they were like, great game. I'd love to chat to you about it afterwards. Like, and that's something that had never happened before, because they would have been probably grumbling under their voice, going, "Oh man, this guy's an absolute prick. I don't want to talk to him about this." But being just like a fierce competitor on the ground, but then also really supporting, not like saying, "Oh, great play there," because I don't want you to beat me on the ground or eliminate me or anything, but sort of just I quite enjoyed when someone did something good. I'd be like, give them a little head nod, and then that kind of like verbal cues that you're giving them, that's awesome, man. Like, respect what you did there and stuff, but you don't need to verbally say it. I think then you're garnering that respect for your opponent, and I found that to be a big sort of cue learning point. But then the afterwards was the actual part where it really took hold and had the impact, where people were like, "Oh yeah, cool, like we've got mutual respect here, love to have a chat to you about it." And you know whether you have a Coke or a beer after the game, you could actually feel comfortable about going into the pavilion or going into the other team's changing room and actually having a really cool corridor about the match, and talking it through, which is great.
I love that. It reminds me, we had Sir Wayne Smith on the pod a couple weeks ago, and he told a story about getting invited to have a cup of tea with legendary basketball coach John Wooden. And he asked John Wooden, what happens often in basketball, there's a timeout like a minute before the end of the game.
Yeah.
And John Wooden took his team to, 10 NCAA championships. And he said, in that final timeout, Smithy asked him, what do you say to the, is it like a secret play for like how you're going to win the game? And John Wooden said, no, all I say to them is, when the final whistle blows, don't make fools of yourselves,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is exactly what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
My next question is about this premise of fiercely competitive. So I've heard you say, multiple times already in this conversation, fiercely competitive first, and you have to be fiercely competitive to achieve at that level, which is really consistent from what I'm hearing across the board, right? That, John Kerwin said, balance is bullshit. Graham Henry said, you can't, like, you have to be a little bit obsessive.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing you say, this is really consistent with everything I'm hearing, that if you want to be achieving at the absolute highest level, this is not like, oh, well, I will do, 6 hours and then take 4 hours to, contemplate whatever. Like, you have to be kind of single-minded about this. Did you, once you started appreciating that, oh, I can be gracious off field and hyper competitive on field. Was there ever a moment where you went, oh, but actually, if I lean too much in this way, it's going to detract from my competitiveness? Was that ever a struggle for you, or no?
Yeah, to be fair, it was particularly sort of coming into the early stage of my New Zealand career. So I debuted when I was 20, but I started representing New Zealand sides from the age of 17. So, age group sides and then into my 20s. And I always kind of felt that that competitive edge was a major driver. I'd be classic, right? I'd go for a run and then I'd be like, I'm not running fast enough. The opposition that I'm about to play, Australia, they're probably running faster than me. I've got to go harder and faster. And this guy's going to say something to me on the ground, and I know it would drive me to run faster and faster. And then I'd be like pushing more weight in the gym, and it was like something was a real big driver for me through that phase. And I don't and I to be fair, there were definitely times where I made error and I went too far, but I don't look back on it and reflect on it with negativity around how I was, because it actually was something that helped to shape me in terms of my drive into where I was. But the good thing was is that I was able to learn and not to still stay in that bubble where I kept drifting down. I was able to learn and grow. And I think because I was able to do it over time in parallel, right? So I was talking to you about 13 to 23, kind of as that range. I was able to not just go, okay, I'm now going to be super compassionate, and then all of a sudden my competitive nature then just folds completely. I was able to kind of do it over time, and then because I was able to do it over time and learn over that sort of 10-year cycle, it meant that when it sort of started to bridge into being on a 50-50 medium, I was pretty comfortable with where it sat. And I still was super competitive, right? Because I'd had 10 years of being bloody competitive and it was never going to leave me. I think once a high performing athlete, you're always one and you're always going to be driven. But it was just how that drive was transpiring onto the ground was probably the bit that I had to adapt and change. And I think the good thing is that you just want to be a learner. And I think most HP athletes are avid learners. And if you are an avid learner, you do have this, the capability to change your stripes a little bit, which fortunately I was lucky enough to do. But as I've said, and I would say numerous times again, you need people in your corner to be able to call you out on your bullshit, pretty much. Because if they don't, you might get stuck, or you might not see the wood for the trees, kind of thing.
Let's talk about the people in your corner. So you mentioned rugby, as you were able to see that, oh, after the game, people would have that kind of high five, or you said a cuddle, which I loved. You obviously played a team sport. How did you work as a team to care for each other and hold each other to account, to maintain high standards while also building those connections and that closeness that you need to perform? What was the
Yeah,
relationship there?
it's a real interesting question, that one, because it's a funny one. At the moment, if you think about all organizations, schools, workforce, sport, etc., cultures are really bandied around word. And it's like the question is, what is good culture? Good culture to me is bottom up, not top down. So if you keep on the teams where we never and I've had plenty of them where we never succeeded. It was tried to be, the culture was just, this is the coach's way. This is going to be imprinted on who we are. Whereas if we were able to, they were able to, put their fingers into it and kind of give you little bits of ideas around what good could look like, particularly when we were younger. We were able to grab that as a playing group and then build that through. And good culture is when you're, I view it in your lowest lows, and that's normally around performance. Your culture is united. So a really good indication of this of trends, it's just the most prevalent story because it's the most recent, is now working with the New Zealand men's side as a coach. To be fair, I thought our culture was really good, and you kind of never that sure as a coach, right? You feel it's good. The players kind of will say it's good, the reviews kind of say it's good, but you don't actually know. And we finished last in Paris. We had an awful campaign. We had got hit with 14 cases of COVID before game one. We lost 3 of our most key players to obscure injuries that you'd never see in a hockey ground. One broke his leg, another one fractured his arm, 2 of them did their knees. Like, it was just a outrageously crazy tournament. But what happens normally, and I've been in campaigns like this before, is that you lose, and then your team disbands. Like, the end of the campaign finishes and they all go off, and they they rightly so go see family or whatever, but they almost never get back together again. And what I really found in Paris is that the team got tighter. So we finished and it was great. It was awful, but they actually went like this and they all stuck together. That for me is the proof of what good culture can look like. And I think that's one where, if you're willing to have hard conversations with, and I'll go back to me as a player, but if you're willing to have hard conversations with your teammates, you don't let things walk by in the corridor. Like, I might walk. I'm sure I've heard Wayne Smith say this before as well, but if you're walking down the corridor or you see something you don't like, that would be part of who you deem to be as good culture within your environment, because you know of the values and the standard sets that you've got. If you walk by, that's poor culture. And good teams that I've been in, you would walk by and you'd call that out because it's not adhering to what you would do. The other one is that everyone that's in your group behind closed doors will do the work. They'll do the mahi, right? They turn up to physical fitness testing and they're crushing it because they've put in the work. We get onto the sports ground and everyone's driven to train just as hard as everyone else. Those are real key aspects around what you can do. And I think the fierce competitive nature, I think if you've got, like a good half of your team are like that, your team dynamic and training environment and game environment will be great, right? Because they can be the game driver, the training driver, which will bring the level and intensity always there. If you don't have enough of them, I think the intensity in that you can work at can be a little bit too low. So it's got to be, we're talking about it from an individual point of view, but also in a team point of view. If you had way too many in the compassionate space, I don't think the team dynamic would work that well, or way too many in the competitive space. I don't think the team dynamic would work that well. You either have to be 50-50 balance yourself, or the team has to have a good core of competitive nature and then a good core of the compassionate ones. So then they work in equilibrium or in parallel. So then your team dynamics are going to go really well.
The first thing that I heard you say is you can tell you have a good culture because in your lowest lows, the team is united. I love this. And what I take from that is that pressure reveals truth. That you can, at a superficial level on the surface, have a good culture, but it's not until you come under pressure that you can actually know whether you have a good culture. And I heard you share a few indicators of a good culture. So things like, that everybody does the work behind the scenes. People don't walk by, unacceptable behavior. Was there any in those teams where you had the strong culture? Was there anything that was done explicitly to cultivate that? Or did it just emerge organically?
Like the good ones are when you do set the scene work right at the start of a campaign. So whenever we go into a new cycle, so hockey, we kind of work in 2 or 4 year cycles. So we go from, let's say, post-Olympics Paris, and then we're going to build through to the next World Cup 2 years, and then we'll go from World Cup to Olympics another 2 years. You'll always do a kind of a foundation couple of days around setting the scenes. And then in that kind of work, you'll go, what are the values that you want to bring out or be known as a team? So we do forward-facing values. So if we were going to forward-facing is any time that we turn up to an international match, what are our friends going to see? What are our family going to see? What's the opposition going to see? What are they going to be able to tell about the Black Sticks men's team when they walk away from this game or this training? And those, we want them to be able to actually visually see some of the good parts of our culture. So that might be end of a training, end of a game. They're going to be immersing themselves with the crowd, like simple things. They want to see that we are compassionate people with our opposition on after a win or a loss, that we're going to go shake hands, all those kind of innate little values. But then we're going to have our intrinsic ones, right? Our personal values. So we take the sweep the sheds mentality, so no one cleans up after the Black Six, we clean up after ourselves. So the shirt is you play for what's in front, not from what's in behind. All those, and I don't even say these as cliche sayings. They're just sayings that are innately Kiwi. So not only in the Black Six men's side, but obviously the All Blacks and the Black Ferns and all sorts of sporting teams will have these kind of things. So we're not allowed to, a value that might be that a new guy into our team might take his playing shirt off after the game and he'll throw it into the corner. We would expect one of our leaders or even a guy that's been playing 10 games to go to that person, not call them out on it because they're learning, right? To say, hey, that's your shirt. You have to really respect that. We want you to fold that, put it back in your bag because it's something that you need to hold true and cherish to yourself. So little bits and pieces like that will be the kind of foundation setting the scenes that we'll do in terms of our values. And then we'll have our value sets that will kind of travel with us throughout games and tournaments and trainings and things like that. So normally the hardest part, and I think this is for any organization, as I said, school or sport, is to how do you know if you're really living your values? Like you might go, okay, well, here's 3 days we're going to do values, and then all of a sudden we lift up the carpet and then sweep it under, and then it's never adhered to or lived. The key for me now as a coach or when I was a player is that you're trying to keep on saying, hey, look, remember these are as our values, remember these as our culture. So then you'll see that people will start picking them up and delivering on them. We try to, one of the things that we try to remove later on in my career was that all the young guys did everything because it's like putting them in the bottom and then the senior guys would do nothing. So simple ones of that is that the end of training, the balls all need to be picked up, the gear needs to be picked up, and then you'd see the captains would go straight away and do it. And if they're doing it, they're leading by example, and then the younger ones would come through. So instead of the older ones telling the younger ones to do it, as soon as the older ones just did it, everyone started doing it. So the key one is just probably from a coach perspective is just keep on leaning into your leaders, and then when it becomes natural, it becomes normal, they just do it. And then when they do it, your younger ones just naturally follow. So they're the sort of key ones that you want to keep bringing out in your culture and how your values and stuff will work and embed into your team.
I heard you say originally that culture works best when it's bottom up versus when it's top down, like dictated by the coach. And then you mentioned just now at the beginning of a campaign, you might have an exercise where you're establishing what are going to be your forward facing values, what are going to be internal values. How did you go about getting the captains to go and pick up the balls? How did you go about creating the environment such that the player who'd been there for 10 games was able to go to the new player and say, hey, you need to fold your jersey?
Yeah, I'll put my coach's hat on for this one.
Right.
So as a coach, I can never tell you to do something, but I can ask you the right question, right? So the art of questioning is super important. So I have a coach mentor in Craig Philpott. He's really supported me in terms of the way I would question instead of me telling go, hey mate, like I might say Nick Woods, he's our current captain, go, hey Nick, you've got to go pick up the balls. He's going to take that and go, like, are you telling me to go do it? And then I could, instead of reframe it and go, hey, Woodsy, what does good look like after training? And then he might go, oh yeah, well, I might say, oh, we've got to pick up the balls, we've got to pick up the cones, we've got to do a really good warm down. And I said, yeah, cool. Like, how are you going to lead this? And then he might then do it. So the art of questioning is super important. So obviously I've had coaches in the past when I was an athlete that had really good ways to do that, but it's not being the person that will tell, because if you tell, you get resistance. If you question in the right way, then you'll get buy-in. As soon as you get buy-in, you get belief, you get leadership, and you get self-leadership, and that's what you want. That's when you know it's taken hold. So if you do that the first time, you might need to do it a second time. You may even have to do it a third time because we're learning people right, and it takes 1, 2, 3 times for it to bed itself in. But once you've done it those sort of 3 times, then you'd think that it's gonna continue on and build from there.
I love that so much. And I'm going to tie it back to, you mentioned before, having people on the team that have a similar level of ambition, hunger, drive, that if they bring that ambition, hunger, drive to a questioning environment, then of course they're going to pick up what you're putting down in terms of like, what does good look like? Because they are people who we've already established they want to be performing at a high level. And so when you
Yeah,
create that space for them to lean into it, of course, they're going to jump into that space. You mentioned the putting the coach's hat on. Obviously, 4 times Olympian as a player, 1 time Olympian as a coach. What is something that you observed as a coach that made you go, "Oh my gosh, I really did not realize that when I was a player"?
yeah. Um, Yeah, probably the work behind the scenes as a coach comparative to a player. So as a player, you're hockey focused, right? So you or sport focused, you go, when am I training, start, finish, when am I playing, start, finish, and then as a coach, you're doing everything. So literally every waking moment you're on. It's of instead of a player, I would think personally about myself. I might try and connect up with a few people just to check in or play some cards and formally do it. But as a coach, you're trying to check in with everyone or the striking group, the midfield group, the back group, and you're trying to then pre-prepare for your next game. So you're trying to do a lot bigger scope of what it takes to then build the platform and the foundation so the playing group feel really comfortable about what they've just done and then where they're going to go to in terms of performance. And that's probably the biggest part. The biggest learning bit that I struggled with to start with, and this is probably the athletes that transition into coaches, is that you have to be really careful about saying I. So I started coaching really quickly, like I was finished in 2021 and then started coaching internationally at 2022. Is that I would always do, I would say, oh, so when I was playing, or when I did this, or when I did this, and then it's not good. It's something it probably took again my head coach with the men, so Greg Nicol, and my mentor who would come in and watch me coach a bit to call me out on it and say, they don't want to know what you did. You've got the skill that we're able to do it, but you need to give them the learning. So that's again the art of questioning. So you would again say, what does good look environment, or when we are doing this well, what does it look like? When we need to do this better, what does it look like? Instead of going, oh, when I did this, this is what I would do. And that's a really big transitional moment that I went through as a coach. Probably took me, I would say, even 6 months of doing it. I started to recognize it earlier, but you would still catch yourself. So, we all have those little sayings or things that we say in our head, and then you go, oh, damn, I did it again. But that would be the one that I've transitioned to, and I almost don't say it exclusively now, unless the athlete really wants to hone in on when they would ask me, hey, so when you were playing, when you were in this position, what did you do? And they've actually given me the ability to then show my sports specific learning, but otherwise I would always put it back on to them.
That is such a great insight. I love that. And I think that as a leader in any environment, it's a valuable insight, right? How
Yeah,
much how much am I trying to like live my own performance through you, and how much am I trying to support you to perform? You mentioned your sports specific experience. And you also spoke about, you had this experience with the Black Sticks last year, really challenging experience. You've been at this game long enough, I would say, to have experienced not only the lowest of lows, but also the highest of highs. If you look at the kind of total, if you zoom out and look at the totality of those experiences and you go, okay, what are some of the patterns that emerge on the teams that were able to really perform or the teams that really struggled? Do you have a sense of how much of a factor it is the mental space and the connectivity of the team compared to the technical tactical skills or the fitness levels, and do they feed into each other? Like, are we able to achieve higher fitness because we have a closer relationship as a team, or are these things that don't kind of come into play?
yeah. They to be fair, they all work in unison. I don't want to diminish like lower level sport, but you might be able to, like if you're playing club hockey or club football on the weekend, you might not need the physical fitness throughout a game, but you might need your skill acquisition or whatever to still perform. But in the highest elements of sport, if you really missed one of the pillars, and I'm talking about not every individual had to have all of them, right? So I might not have been the fittest person, but I might have had really good technical, tactical acumen. And then it might have been super mentally strong, for example. We don't need everyone to be exactly the same, and we don't need everyone to hold all of them, but you need a good foundation of all three to be able to perform. Because if across the board, if you've got 60 or 70% of your group is physically not fit enough to cope with the standard of sport, or in my case hockey, you're going to really battle. And we've had that before in the past, where we probably went too heavy in the gym and negated we were super strong, but we weren't physically fit enough. So with hockey, uh, obviously for your listeners, or those that don't know, is that internationally hockey is a tournament-based sport. So we'll normally play a game, have 22 hours rest, and then play another one. And then the players are covering between 8 and 10 kilometers per match, and all of those 8 to 10 kilometers are at high speed. So our players need to be physically fit, and then they've got to be robust enough. So we're off to Malaysia in about 2 weeks, and we're going to play 5 games in 7 days, and that will be in 35 to 38 degrees and 80 to 90% humidity. So we need a physically fit team to be able to cope with the nature of our sport. But then on the flip side of that, if you don't have this, you could be as fit as hell, but if you don't have the technical tactical acumen, you could just run around, but then you can't actually hold the ball. So you need the balance of being able to do that. You would hope that kind of if you get to the top end of your sport, you're going to have a large like covering of that one. So I would kind of say internationally, technical tactical should be probably the one that is more of the given. The physical one is the one that you will always consistently work on to bring the level up. And that is, for me, that's probably the most controllable element. I think you can always get yourself fit. You can always be fitter than what you are or what you were 6 months ago if you're driven to be a high performance athlete. That is, for me, the easiest to control. Technical, tactical, obviously, relies on in the environment you're in, plus the training you do, and then also the opposition that you're going to play. But then that leads to obviously the last one. The last one's the most important, is the mental side of sport. So when the going gets tough, who gets going, or who leaves? And then I've seen people sink and swim in the same environment, and it is a challenging one, right? So if you've got a mentally strong team, regardless of the situation you're in, you can always drive through. Like I know you guys have worked with the Crusaders, and through their elements of time, you'd kind of be 15 minutes to go in the game, and they're losing, but you kind of always have that feeling, oh, they're going to win this game. I was watching the Hurricanes play the Highlanders on the weekend, and I was kind of thinking the same thing, although they left it super late, scoring in the 82nd minute. But it was one of those feelings you kind of have when a team is sort of viewed either a little bit over top of, or that they've been in those situations many times before, and then the cream always rises to the top. That's probably the hardest one to learn, though, because you either need a really strong cultural environment in terms of the players that are mentally strong around you, because then you feed off it and you grow and you learn, and you see those players in those environments to help and grow you from there. So playing environment's super important. You need really stable, mentally strong coaching group. So when the going gets tough, they get calmer instead of like explode. And then because if you explode as the coach, the players feed off you. And then if people go into red head v blue head, red head means they lose all control. So as a coach, you need to get calmer as the game gets more intense. So if you can do that, it's great. And then obviously you need sport-specific psychology or mental skills that are embedded into your group. So you've got that kind of independent view around how that can operate. So if you've got all three layers of that mental sort of capability learning, your team will often rise to the top.
What do you do? You mentioned the mental piece of it. You used the term most important. Obviously, they're all important, and you said they work interdependently. What do you do specifically to train the mental piece of it, not the sport-specific sports psychology side, but the side of being able to remain calm under pressure, being able to, mention the Crusaders, like we got 15 minutes to go, we're down by 10 or whatever it is, like how are we going to stay in this game right through until the final whistle? Is that something that you explicitly train? And if so, how do you do that?
Yeah. So we train it in a couple of ways. So one, in certain trainings, we'll put the players through crazy stimulus, right? Like we'll do outrageous rules. We'll make them run until they can't breathe or they want to vomit, and then you kind of chuck them back into sports. You're really impinging on their capability to think and stay calm in the moment. Those are like, and you can do those on the training paddock, which then can kind of force them into um, mental toughness learning moments within that environment. So then they get more used to it as well. The other one that we've found is if you have sport specific calls. So in the actual game, it might be we've been defending the line for our goal for a whole heap of time, and then all of a sudden we get the ball. We might say we use a rugby league term 40-20. So we'll dish the ball down the other end, and then we go and put a press on them. So what you want to do normally is try to go united alignment. If you can do that when the going gets tough, then it brings everyone back onto the same page. If we don't have sport specific calls and you're just relying on an individual to try and get you out of it, that is when it doesn't really matter where you sit mentally. So everyone could be mentally strong, but they're only working in isolation. But if they are then all mentally strong and then they get on the same page, you'll see that you go, okay, yeah, cool, let's go down there. And then you'll see all the communication lift, and then you'll see everyone get on the same page, and we're trying to then reignite or dominate the game in return. So that's where a coach's view and a coach's mind could support those elements as well. And they're really good aspects for in-game learning and support into that environment.
I love that. What I'm hearing you say is we train pressure. We
Yep.
train to be under, we train the muscle of being under pressure, staying under pressure, coping under pressure, remaining calm under pressure.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the Tokyo Olympics. You mentioned that, hockey it's a campaign-based, tournament-based sport. You're training 2 years, you're training 4 years, you're gearing up to this big goal. You're getting close to this big goal. It's for you, your final time that you're going to be doing this as a player. It gets yanked away from you, postponed. You don't know what's going to happen. What was your mental and emotional space like during that time
Um,
of postponement, and then when it came to the actual event and you're
yeah.
performing for
Yeah.
empty stadiums?
Yeah. Yeah, it was hard, like to be fair, because I knew that was my last hurrah. It was always going to be Tokyo. When it got pulled out, the competitive person in me said, you can still do this. The realistic person in me said, I don't know, because I was 36 at that time and I'd been suffering a couple of injuries through my calves. My calves are my kryptonite. They yeah, it's still my kryptonite. Did the half marathon on the weekend, tweaked my calf again. It's a few too many times now, but it was pretty hard to take. But also because it was when you kind of have pre-announced that it's your last crack, your family gets really embedded in it as well. So then my dad, my mum, my brother, etc. I think my wife at that stage was going to come, but we just had a baby not far after that. So it was one of those things where we really were trying to get everyone there, which would have obviously been really cool to have your family there. And then you kind of know that you're close to it, even though selection hadn't happened then, right? But you feel like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be a part of this group. And then I had to go through a bit of a recycle after the COVID pandemic, and then kind of reassess to see if I was going to be able to still do this or not. And the reason why I did it was solely down to my wife. She said, "You're not finished." So she said, "You got to do it. You're gonna be unbearable to live with if you don't give it a crack."
Can I
And so
dig in
that,
on can I dig in on that for just a second? I'm
yeah,
sorry to
yeah,
interrupt
yeah.
you, but here's what I'm imagining is that you're I'm making up a story about this, that you're there talking to your wife going, should I do it? Should I not? And your wife goes, you have to do it because you're going to be unbearable. But what's actually, it's down to her. But what's actually happening is she's seeing that you're like, I am desperate to do this, and I just need someone
Yeah,
to
yeah,
tell me it's okay.
yeah.
Is that story at all
Yeah,
aligned to reality?
it's pretty much nail on the head. She could sense it, and like she's your wife, your partner, they're the ones that can read you the best, right? So she could read that I had unfinished business, and it was going to be a hard slog, right? So it was no guarantee of any test matches all the way leading into Tokyo. We were fortunate enough to play a couple of against Australia, and then we went to Perth and played in Australia, and then we got locked down in Perth. So we had 7, 8 days stuck in Perth because they had one case, and then so we got stuck there, and then leaving on the plane to Tokyo was real surreal. Like it was kind of leaving to an environment which you didn't really know what was going to take hold, because it was kind of like the Olympics itself, or the sport you were playing, became second fiddle to this bigger thing that was in the world that we were living in, and rightly so, right? The pandemic was killing a lot of people worldwide, and it was horrific. And then you're kind of going, geez, on the other side of the coin, how lucky am I still to be going to the Olympics? So that's kind of the way we tried to see it as a playing group and as individuals, is that we are still lucky to be going here. It was crazy though. Like it was, I felt so sad for Tokyo. They put in all this effort to have this games, and then for it to be put on, but to have no one there, then all my family had to cancel their flights and accommodation, and they couldn't go. And then you're playing this sport that you've loved for your whole life, and it's the last time you're going to do it, and no one's there. Like it was just like a really weird, surreal time. And then I'd played all over the world for a long time, and I had heaps of friends across all the other nations, and you just couldn't even go and talk to them. We were all masked up. You had to sit in your little food booth, and it's got perspex glass here and in front, and you couldn't do anything. Even in our team environment, we had to be in our small little mini lounge, and we had to have masks on. Like it was just an environment we know we had to do, but a crazy environment to also be part of. The other part, like I was lucky enough that was my fourth Olympics, but obviously it was pretty sad that was some people's first and what they experienced. Although, once an Olympian, always Olympian, so that's a cool thing that they were also able to experience. But in sport, you never get the end that you always want. So with 3 games to go, I tore my hamstring. We had in the game before, another guy, Hugo Ingles, he tore his hamstring, and then another one, and the same guy I played tore his hamstring. So we were obviously doing something wrong in our cooling strategies, and our sport-specific science stuff to have recurring injuries, because you should never have that many of the same injury, same site that we did. And because I was the oldest, we kind of we're down numbers. So you have 16 on the ground. We were down to 15. So we all missed the next game against Australia. And then the last game, it was basically who could then cope with playing. And I was like, well, I'm not going to play after this, so I'll give it a crack. And I actually put a local anesthetic into my hamstring to be able to play. So then I would obviously try not to feel it. Didn't lasted 7 minutes in my last game before my hamstring went kaboom. So from a mini tear to a outrageously big one, and then basically the rest of my league went black. But it was something that I was 100% willing to do. The 2 other guys, George and Hugo, they were still had a lot of hockey left in their careers, so I was like, don't take this risk. It's something I'm happy to do in my last game. So it's something that I did. And then that's kind of how it all finished. And then we ended up flying back into MIQ for 2 weeks. And then as we were coming out of MIQ, I'll actually tell you a funny story in MIQ. I retired in MIQ officially to the world, and then told the rest of my team. They kind of all knew, but told my team that I'd retired. And then you're walking. You got 45 minutes twice a day to walk outside around this. We're in Christchurch, around the airport hotel, and then went downstairs. You meant to stay 2 meters apart from each other. I'd retired. My manager, Kev Ma, said, "Hey mate, well done." Gave me a fist pump, and I was like, "Yeah, thanks, Kev, appreciate it. You've been there for a long part of the ride." Thought nothing of it. Went back upstairs an hour later. Dunk, 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 dunk. Sorry, sir, we need a COVID test. Your outside privileges have been revoked. I was like, what? Because I'd touched someone else. So from a fist pump. So that that was my MIQ experience. Wasn't that enjoyable. And then basically we left MIQ and we're straight into lockdown again. Because New Zealand was when the cases started to come back again. And so it was a surreal time on the sporting landscape. Obviously, the bigger picture stuff will always take precedent over us playing sport. We were still lucky to be able to do it. I was still lucky to be able to play a fourth Olympics and still, you know, do as many games as I did in my career. But obviously, it didn't finish the way I wanted. But I was probably one of the lucky ones where I still got to do the length of my career, regardless of how that last sort of game finished for me.
There is so much in that story. I'm particularly injected a local anesthetic into the hamstring. Like, I'm just going to pretend like this isn't happening. And it sounds like you were fully aware of the risk you were taking and fully prepared to do it. And I don't hear any regret in your voice or in your telling of the story. When your hamstring fully blew, did you black out? Did you get carried off the field? Like, how did you,
Uh, I,
what
I,
happened next?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a crazy bastard when it comes to pain and playing through things. I'll tell you another story after this one, but basically it blew, and I was right close to the sideline, and it was quite tight against Argentina, and then I just kind of like rolled off the sideline so then someone else could come on, and then I just sort of did a bit of an army crawl before the physio got to me, but I didn't want to stop the game. But I was always known for doing crazy things with my body when it came to injury. So we were playing in Malaysia in 2015, and it was no, sorry, start of 2016. It was about 3 months out from the Rio Olympics, and playing game, and I went up to receive an overhead, and a Canadian guy, just mutual contest, kneed me right in the rib. And I was like, oh, Jesus, on the ground, no good. Got a CT scan, and I'd broken clean through one of my bottom ribs and fractured the top of my hip bone. And I was like, oh, yeah, man, this hurts. But I was thinking kind of like, not as bad as I think, not as bad as what I've been told a broken rib was like. So then I taped it up and I played the next game. People thought, how the hell are you doing this? Played the next game, and then playing against Pakistan. If you know what a hockey ball is like, it's extremely hard. And then so got a crash ball. It was coming at my head, put my hand up, hit me right in the middle finger, snapped my middle finger clean through. And I was like, I'm not having a good time with this tournament. And then I ended up playing the next game as well. So the next game I played with a broken rib, a broken finger. It was against Japan. Got to about 3/4 of the way through. Told my coach Colin Batch and walked off. And I was like, mate, I know I'm a bit crazy and I can hold pain, but I can't do this anymore. I'm no good. Like the anesthetic wore off my finger. My ribs started hurting like anything. And it's probably one thing that sports people do is that you get real caught in the moment, and right then and there, and probably if I'm like reflecting on it, I could have severely compromised my ability to go to the Rio Olympics. But in sport, you kind of think then and there, and we didn't have the full medical staff to be able to give you those innate feedback tools around should you be doing this or not. It was kind of like player perception and can you handle pain? And I've always been one, pain is temporary, and just pain is pain. Just go through it. Just drive yourself through it. You'll be fine. And I was managed to get through, but then pulled pin, but was lucky enough that I healed well enough. It took me about 8 weeks, and I was only about probably about 4 weeks away from going to Rio before I actually came back to being fully healed. But I think like Batchy, the coach at that stage, and then the players were like, we want this guy in Rio. Like he's one that will go to war for this group. And then like I proved that in 3 games in a row with what I went through, and then the players will follow.
It's so interesting. First of all, I feel like this episode is going to need a little like, don't try this at home warning to our listeners. But second of all, what I'm hearing there is, everything taken to its extreme has a flip side to it. Yeah. And so the same thing that is cultivating mental toughness in you and cultivating the ability to push through discomfort to achieve the outcome is also the thing that can get you to continue to play with a broken rib and a broken finger and a fully torn hamstring, even when it might end up taking you to a place that doesn't serve you. And it sounds like in Tokyo you made a deliberate choice of like, okay, well, I know I'm at the end of my career, so I'm consciously sacrificing. But in Malaysia, you were going, broken rib, what? No, I'm fine. I'll just keep going. Broken finger, no problem. I'll just keep going. And having that kind of awareness of is it competitiveness and ambition and deliberate pushing through this pain, or is it foolhardiness to
Yeah.
keep going the way I'm going?
Yeah,
We,
it's a combo, I reckon. Like I was so competitive, I didn't want to not put on the black shirt and always represent my country if I felt like I could step out on the ground and not compromise the team. So we didn't have reserve players or anything. So if me playing meant that we had a full squad, I would play, right? And then even if it was reduced from 100% down to 80, I can still contribute to the group. If I felt that I ever got lower than that, I would then, like say, well, Batchy, don't play me. I'm only sitting on the bench as a covering player if someone else gets hurt. But the thing is that I think everyone, and now I think it's just the way in the world we live in, everyone's chasing this unicorn, this perfection. In my career, I played 320 internationals. Not one of them would I have been at 100%. Not a single game. But I could play if I was 90%. I could play to it's going to sound weird, but I could play to 100% of my capability at that 90, if that makes sense. So this is where I'm at, right? So like try to explain it a little bit better. Like I might be going, I've woken up, I'm not feeling at my best, I might be, a little bit tired, a little bit run down. We might have played a game the day before. So I'm never ever going to be at 100, but I can give you a max of that 90. So that's what I mean by that 100% of 90. I can give you my max at that 90%, but chasing that 100% is the unicorn. It's the myth. Ask any international athlete on the planet, have you ever performed at 100%? I almost reckon most of them would say no. Almost guarantee all of them would say no.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. I'm going to ask future guests. We've got time for just one more question. You, in addition to being a coach now, you're an entrepreneur. What have you learned from being an entrepreneur that you didn't realize from being either a player or a coach? And what have you taken from being a player or a coach into your entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, so probably as an athlete, the beauty of it is that you fail, but you get to do it again the very next day or the very next week, and you can kind of wash the water with it, or wash your hands of that failure. But you're using it to learn for the next one, right? And then learn to the next one. So that's the growth and the learning pattern that you can get on. Probably what I didn't realize when I started my entrepreneurial journey is that failure can be costly. So you can do one wrong move and it can cost you a bunch, whether that's in people and money, just in actually the way things work. But what was good and what I sort of was able to merge in between the two is that failure and the entrepreneurial journey was okay because I'd learn how to fail here, or not learn how to fail because you don't want to fail, but you learn how to cope with it. So I was able to cope with the failure, although it almost hit home harder because it's more right there, right now, and it actually impacts more than just you. But I was able to learn and grow and change, and then actually go, okay, failure is okay, failure is okay, failure is okay, because then you're actually getting growing. And then by the time I sort of, I would have failed maybe 5 or 6 times on the entrepreneurial journey, but every time I was able to learn. If I just stopped, it would have just that's it, right? You're going, okay, I'm over failing. But because I'd gone through the sports journey and failing can be part of every day, right? And then you grow and grow and grow. Then by the time I got to the end of the entrepreneurial growth and platform, I've now got a really good foundation of where things are going and where things are working. So now I know that I've got a business that will work. I've got a business that will grow, and it will only be through poor management that it would fail again. But it was you don't learn unless you make those jumps or those moves to start with. So almost all, like, I listen to a heap of podcasts myself, but almost all like millionaires or ultra entrepreneurs, they'll tell you how many times they've failed, and failure is good because it just means that you're going to learn and grow for the next one or the next time you do things.
What a fantastic note to end on. This just something that's come through over and over and over again in this conversation, which is learning from everything, learning from every opportunity, continuous, never ending learning. Shea, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I've really loved talking to you and learning a little bit more about you. Thank you for your generosity and all the stories you've shared. It's been an absolute delight to have you on the pod.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for listening. Please do let me know your feedback. You can reach me at hello@kylacolbin.com. One of the things I loved about this conversation was how all in he was. Like, he's going to inject his hamstring with anesthetic, and then when his hamstring blows, he's going to roll off the field and like army crawl to the physio so he doesn't interrupt the game. Like, that man was not holding anything back. Thanks again for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for my conversation with legendary rugby coach Sir Graham Henry. Hunger and Heart is brought to you by the Crusaders Leadership Programme. Whether you're coaching under fives or a professional team, we all want the same thing: to build a culture of trust, to get the best out of your people, and to grow players into leaders. The Crusaders Leadership Program lets you get up close and personal with some of the greatest rugby legends of all time. People like Sir Wayne Smith, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Read. You'll connect with a global group of ambitious, caring coaches from a range of codes and backgrounds. And most importantly, you'll gain skills and techniques to drive impact and outcomes for your team. The Crusaders Leadership Program is a 2-week, high-intensity virtual experience. It is delivered exclusively online, accessible from anywhere. Hunger and Heart listeners get 10% off the full price of the program. Use the code HUNGER at checkout. You can find out more about the Crusaders Leadership Program at crusadersleadership.com. That's crusadersleadership.com. Hunger and Heart is created by BOMA and the entire BOMA team, including Tito Bernal, Ray Jangle, Hannah Hudson, Johanna Coxon, Sunil Unka, and me, Kyla Colbin. Thanks for listening.